Okay, so quite a few people have been asking me for this, which is basically a tier list for all of the upcoming SSR character, well, all of the SSR character in this game. Now, previously I already created one for all of the future UR and also SP character, but I didn't include any of the SSRs, and that's kind of why I will be covering them off here. Now, back in the days when Global first released, I did create a dupe tier list as well for the SSR at that point in time. So the first few characters of each tier, you probably recognize them as being the ones that were there on day one. I'm not going to talk about them again. If you actually want the explanation for why they're in all of those tiers, then do check out my previous video. I will share the link for both that video and also all of the UR and SP ones in the comment section, okay? So you guys just go check that out. Now, in terms of the other SSR character that I'll be going through today, the tier is still going to be obviously 6 dupe, 2 dupe, or 0 dupe, because that's when they actually get their skill, unlock their additional skills. As per usual, when a character is 6 dupe, that's not to say, for example, he's not playable at 0 dupe, right? You can still totally play them. It's just that they tend to get a massive upgrade when they actually reach that certain dupe level, which actually make them shine in comparison to, let's say, other characters of their same position. So that's kind of why a lot of time you do actually want to ideally get them to that dupe level if possible. I will talk about the explanation for all of the characters briefly, so you guys please do just actually watch the video rather than just take a screenshot of the list, because sometimes I will be making some judgment calls in terms of in what circumstance should you actually get them to that dupe level, okay? And also vice versa. If a character is in 0 dupe, that doesn't mean, for example, if you do have some extra dupes, you should never dupe them up. It's just that they are at lower priority. However, let's say you play, let's say Suki, right? The first character here. If Suki is going to be in your team all of the time, then of course you still want to put dupes on him over some character that you're never going to see again in the future, right? So just make your own judgment calls in terms of which ones you actually want to dupe out first. My tier list is just more of my suggestions in terms of like what is going to be a priority if you do have to decide between multiple characters. Okay, so the start off with the 6 dupe, the first 4 characters they were on global launch, so I'm not going to talk about that. Next one, Ohira. Ohira is perfectly playable at 0 dupe if you play him in a Shotozawa team, and that's also going to be the same thing with Yamagata. However, both of them are going to get a big upgrade once they get to 6 dupe. For Ohira, it's basically once he's at 6 dupe, you're able to reduce the cooldown whenever he does a critical critical spike or critical receive, which to be honest, he will be doing quite frequently, and therefore you can reduce the cooldown of your entire team, which is massive. And that's also what makes Ohira actually playable once you actually take him out of Shotozawa team, okay? So inside Shotozawa team, 0 dupe is fine for me. Outside Shotozawa team, I did you 160. The same for Yamagata is kind of similar, but in a slightly different direction in the sense that his own ultimate skill will get a reduction in cooldown whenever your teammate perform a critical action. So basically what that means is that all of your cooldown reduction will be just consolidated to himself, right? So for example, if you start off with a serve, which was a critical, then you end up block, which is also critical. You have a receive, which is critical. You have a set, which is also critical. And then you also have a spike, which is also critical. All of a sudden, you have already reduced his cooldown by 10 net crossing, which is massive, okay? But that is only going to happen if you're actually inside Shotozawa team. So for Yamagata, it's almost the other way around. If you are going to play him in a crit team or Shotozawa team, then yes, 6 dupe is going to be very important. Outside of those teams, then you don't have to dupe him at all, okay? Then we move on to Goshiki and also Yuji. Both of them are pretty similar. Basically, at 6 dupe, you have the ability to spam auto attack. Once again, it's not necessary. If you have a second or third strong spiker, you don't need them. However, when you do actually have them at 6 dupe, you can also change up your team building, because now you already have one person who's consistently able to spam their ultimate attack, and therefore allowing you play all of your other characters to be a bit more defensively, okay? So that's kind of what it's actually going to be quite big mechanical difference once you get them to 6 dupe. But obviously up to you guys whether you actually want them for 6 dupe, depending on what your team composition is. Then we have Konoha. Konoha, basically for 6 dupe, he is going to get the ability that whenever your team actually do receive during Team Morale Awakening, you are essentially going to ignore those receive. Basically those receive are not going to contribute towards one of the touches for Team Morale Awakening. So basically it's not going to waste one extra touch. And that is actually pretty important, because basically if you think about normally, you would have 8 touches during your team morale awakening, 2 of them are likely going to be received. So therefore, what that means is that you are essentially able to increase your team morale awakening by an extra 25%. And that's quite big because when you have team morale awakening, it's essentially a buff to your entire team for all of the stats, right? So that's kind of why I do feel like it's a pretty big upgrade if you can get him to 6 dupe. And then for Kita once again playable even at 0 dupe, but at 6 dupe he gets the ability to recover stamina and also increase team morale. Both of them are incredibly useful. So that's kind of why 6 dupe is also going to be a massive upgrade for him. Okay. Then we move on to the 2 dupes. The first 6 characters, they were global launch, so I'm not going to talk about them. Once again, check out my previous video. Shareable 2 dupes, he is going to get the ability to essentially increase reflex for your whole team, and that's going to be very important if you want to build a Shirotodora team with, let's say, a 2 dupe Yushijima, or let's say a 6 dupe for Hira and also Yamagata, because remember what I said earlier, when you have those crits, you are essentially able to reduce the cooldown for your whole team, etc. So that's kind of why it's quite important for him to get to 2 dupes for that boost. Then we have Semi-Ata. Basically, he gets the ability to do back-to-back surf, surf aces. So surf ultimate attack when he gets surf ace, which is once again pretty nice. And then we have Akashi. Akashi at 2 dupe, he's going to get the ability to increase team morale. That is just going to be universally good regardless whether you pair him up with Bokuto, okay? Remember, team morale is essentially buff for your whole team, okay? So that's kind of why it's a pretty big buff if you do get him to 2 dupe. And then similar thing with this guy who I forgot the name, the mid blocker from Fukurodani. Basically, he gets that ability to increase team morale, but only at 2 dupe as well. Vast majority of the time, you will only be playing him in Fukurodani team. And if you're actually in a Fukurodani team, team morale is quite important. So that's kind of once again why 2 dupes are quite important here. Then we have the Liberal. Basically, he's able to reduce his cooldown for his ultimate attack to 6 net crossing. Basically, I think it allows him to use his ultimate almost once every other turn. So it's essentially you're going to get a lot more use out of him, and that's kind of quite nice. So once again, it's quite a big buff for him at 2 dupe. Then we have Suna. Suna is able to apply a debuff, which lasts for, I believe, 8 turns once you are at 2 dupe. So that's a very, very long buff. It's almost going to be like permanent. So that's kind of why this is actually going to be a very good upgrade for him as well. Then we have Aran Ojiro. I think that's his name, right? Aaron Ojiro. Basically, he's able to recover stamina at 2 dupe. It's almost essentially the same as Asahi. So that's kind of why 2 dupe is going to be a massive upgrade for him. And also in the same shoes as Nishino as well, okay? So he consumes stamina, and basically at 2 dupe, he has the ability to recover stamina. So that's going to be massive. Then we have this Liberal from Inarizaki. Basically at 2 dupe, he gets that ability where when one of your teammates receive was not critical, then you're able to reduce the cooldown for your back row receivers, which once again is pretty nice because a lot of time you would want to play him in a Narizaki team, and in Narizaki team is all about not critting, so therefore you're able to reduce the cooldown. So it's almost like an equivalent version of a hero, but kind of relying on not crit rather than crit, okay? So that's kind of why 2 dupe is also pretty nice for him. But if you play him outside of Narizaki team, then you don't need any dupes on him, okay? I did talk about briefly previously that he's also going to be one of the best liberal choice for Fukurodani based team or team morale based team. So if you're going to play him in those kind of teams, then you don't actually need him at 2 dupe. And then lastly, for the 0 dupes, I don't think there's much to talk about. I mean, all of them, if you have the extra resource to dupe them up, then great. But otherwise, they are definitely a lower priority because their skills are just not going to be as important or as consistent as some of the other characters. Or maybe that they're already good enough without those extra skills, and therefore there's no need for you to break the bank to actually upgrade them. Okay, so that's just pretty much the way it is. But yeah, so this is going to be my recommendation on all of the SSR characters and how many dupes you should be aiming for. Let me know what you guys think.